No, we haven't. Okay.
Oh. Okay. Ready to go? Okay. Hello, Northland Preparatory Academy. That is the name of your school. I think the full one is longer, but that's what I'm going to say. My name is Lisa Shen. I am a writer and spoken word artist from Toronto, Canada, and I'm currently visiting Humboldt County as a resident artist at Creekside Arts, which is also the home of Marceau over here. And so what's going to happen today is I'm going to give a brief little intro about what spoken word poetry is. I'm going to give a 20 to 30 minute performance. We're going to have a short Q&A, and then for those of you who would like to stay, we're going to have a writing workshop. So I do want to, before we begin, give a land acknowledgement. So I do want to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the lands of the Wiyot people. And so I am a settler in the broader sense in that my parents are Chinese immigrants who came over to North America, but also in the sense that I'm currently a visitor to this area myself. And like many, I've benefited from the impacts of colonization. Like my residency at Creekside Arts right now would not be happening were it not for the stealing of these lands. And so today I encourage the audience to reflect on their own ancestry and connection to colonization, as well as to dedicate themselves to ongoing learning and allyship. And one website you might find useful for doing this is nativeland.ca, which ends in .ca, but I believe it works for America as well. It worked here. It's a beautiful interactive map that allows you to look up the traditional indigenous territories that you reside on and learn about the treaties, etc. Okay. So, show of hands. How many people here have watched spoken word poetry before, either live or in a YouTube video? Okay, about a third. How many of you have written your own poetry? All right, nice. This is an art school. How many of you have performed your own poetry? How is it that there's more people who have performed than written? That doesn't make sense. How many of you are like, I hate writing and my teacher made me come here? All right, one person. So the goals of this event are that if you have never experienced spoken word poetry before, this will hopefully expose you to the art form, maybe like pique your interest in it a little bit. If you are involved in spoken word, hopefully this will be an opportunity for you to refine that craft. And finally, if you hate writing and your teacher made you come here, at least you're getting out of class. So we are all going to get something out of this event today. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, what is spoken word poetry? Thoughts, ideas? We're crowdsourcing this definition. Yes, in the back, who hates poetry?
My mom calls them Atelier-Galerie, white stories, because she's Ukrainian. She's like, it's not poetry if it doesn't rhyme. But spoken word poetry is basically poetry put to spoken word. It's like, it doesn't have any backing. It's not necessarily a rhyming sort of thing. It's just you putting your thoughts out there and speaking them.
Exactly, yes. Spoken word definitely has a lot of storytelling elements to it. My definition of spoken word is incredibly simple. I say it is any kind of poetry that is written for the purpose of being performed to a crowd like I will do today. It doesn't matter what style it is in, it doesn't matter what topic it's about, it doesn't matter if it rhymes, it can, but it doesn't have to. The only purpose is that it is written with the primary goal of being performed. So, that being said, because spoken word is a performance art, it is alive. And because it is alive, the audience, you, the audience, are a part of it. So, as I give my performance today, I want you to shout some words of encouragement. Yes, you are being actively asked to disturb this performer over here. It's probably the only time you will be allowed to do that in a school assembly, but you're welcome to shout out, yeah, or, ooh, that was really cool, as long as you're being respectful. And you're welcome to snap. Can anyone here snap? Can we get some examples here? Okay, who here can snap? Show of hands. All right, so there's always half the audience that can't snap, so if you can't snap, you're welcome to do air applause. You're also welcome to, I like to, if you wooden pews, you can always like do a little drumming over there. Sometimes people tap their feet. Anything to show some energy, show some excitement, because you are a part of this performance. And without you, this performance will not be amazing. So, Now you know how to do that. And the second announcement that I'm going to make is that spoken word is a beautiful art form, but it often touches on difficult topics. And so I will be giving content warnings for some pieces that might be a bit more sensitive. And so if you feel like, I'll listen to that today, you're welcome to plug in some earbuds. I promise I won't be offended. You're welcome to take a little break outside, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. So, are we ready to hear some poetry? Are we ready to hear some poetry? All right, let the show begin. So, this first piece that I'm going to perform is called Atelier-A, and I do want to give a content warning for physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. So has anyone here seen the documentary Atelier-A? That's single. You guys have Netflix, right? Okay, who here has Netflix? Okay, yeah, so that's really you haven't. So Atelier-A is a documentary about the USA gymnastics team. I'm sure people here have watched the Olympics. You've probably seen the gymnastics team, Simone Biles, etc. And I watched this documentary a few years ago, and it really struck a chord with me, and so I wrote this poem based on it. Atelier-A. After the documentary showcasing USA gymnastics' physical, emotional, and sexual abuse of child gymnasts, this is a story about first times. The first time I chalked my hands in white, I watched as the powdery dust rose upwards, hanging in the air like a breath of snow. The first time I arched backwards across an ocean of blue, I felt myself become seabird, white-feathered gull. I believed I could fly straight onto the podium. They will tell you tales of bravery, of strength and dedication, but the truth is that they trade in dreams, a kind hand in exchange for a spot on the team the first time he touched me. In a darkened clinic, a kind smile on his face, I said nothing. Even then, I knew his fingers were dusted with the promise of Olympic gold, and in any case, I did not always mind the hand, the same one that, like a fairy in the night, snuck candy bars under my starving pillow. How easily a body hungering for kindness feels gratitude towards the only hand that feeds. How easily my body melted like wax to be shaped by his palms, after years of being taught to be moldable, to cling like clay to the wooden bars, riverbed mud hands blistering and cracking under the endless heat of the high noon fluorescent sun bronze. In Michigan, a child is forced to practice her vault until the skin on her feet rips and bleeds silver. In California, a girl is locked in solitary confinement for 3 days without food for failing to meet a target weight gold. In Texas, a gymnast is told to compete on a shattered ankle and 2 compression fractures. Call it honor. Call it representing your nation. Paint my pain in red, white, and blue. Make me a photo shot on a podium. A smile on a fast food commercial. Let me bend for you. Let me ache for you. Let me bruise for you. The thing about first times is that 13 years old is too young to know you are being assaulted on a medical examination table by the highest ranking doctor in American gymnastics. The thing about first times is that they stretch outwards like an oil spill, wet tendrils creeping up to the shoreline, curling their fists around every future memory. And so it is that 10 years from the last time he touched my body, I watched the next line of girls on television. Red, white, and blue leotards shimmering in all their brilliance. Beautiful marionettes with invisible strings. Gold and silver medals dangling like nooses from their necks. Though I have wept and grieved and tried to let my body heal, still, I remember the pain, the hunger, the bruising, the room, the dark, the aching, and his hand, so kind, so trusting. Thank you. All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for listening to that and making space. Again, that documentary is called Atelier-A. It is very well done, so if that piqued your interest, I would highly recommend checking it out. How did I get into spoken word in the first place? For me, I've always loved reading, writing poetry as a kid. I would write my little stories. My mom would type them out for me. But for me, it wasn't until I went to university and I attended a random spoken word event that I completely fell in love with the art form. And ever since then, I've been writing my work. I've been seeking out opportunities, such as this residency over here that has brought me all the way to you right now on the stage in Humboldt County. And so I thought, since I'm talking a little bit about my journey in spoken word, it would be nice for one of my poems to be one of my older pieces of work, one of the first poems I ever wrote. And so this poem that I wrote is called Orca Wandering. It's one of my first pieces. How do the orcas know to trace the shores of the Pacific, from north to south, never ending, between California and the Vancouver coast, clicking and singing to their sisters, dorsal fins straight and gleaming in the western mist, white eye patches reflecting morning glow, eating the turtles and seabirds along the way, beautiful killers. After his mother left, I watched my cousin, a 5-year-old boy, drift from city to city, in Hangzhou to Yangmeiling to Chiang Mai. In the quiet of the night, across thousands of miles of unforgiving Atlantic, I can hear the faint sound of my uncle crying an ocean over his son's heart. Each year, from 2 floors below, drifts the sound of my father's worried tongue, trying to stitch them a passport to Canada. But the orcas know no borders, do not care for statehood marked by ink on paper. They glide silent through the waves, nomads of the sea, as if each drop is their own. I want to ask their watery bodies if they have ever felt a tug of a homeland, or if they live for this kind of roaming. I want to add my voice to the underwater song and whisper, can a boy find a home in wandering too? Thank you. All right, so I hope that poem gives a bit of an example about how spoken word poetry doesn't all have to be the same. That first poem that I performed was more energetic, it was more angry, it was about a very relevant trend, like current topic in the news. But the second poem wasn't, it had more gentle imagery, and spoken word absolutely has that breadth of style in it. Has anyone here ever wanted to write something but felt like they didn't have anything to write about? I'm curious. Okay, so like a few of you. Also, second question, has anyone here ever heard that like great art comes from suffering? Yeah, okay, yeah, we're like, all the artists are tragic, right? They're like heartbroken, they're like on the street, etc. Whoever tells you that your life isn't tragic enough to write good poetry is wrong. And you might hear some other artists tell you this. This might be something that you've seen in the media. I think this is I'm not allowed to swear. I think that this is not true because there is so much good work that can be produced about any kind of topic. And so because of this next poem that I am going to share, I wanted to do something that is a little bit more quirky. It's not about anything sad. I would say it's a pretty happy poem. Who is like born here and has like grown up here? Wait, really? That's it? Wait, seriously, who was born here and grew up here? Or like mostly grew up here? Wait, really? It's a lot of people? Okay, well anyways, I was born and grew up in this suburb of like Toronto, so just think like, you know, suburban houses, picket fence, lawns, soccer field, schools, etc. And for a long time, like everyone, I hated on my city. I was like, I hate Mississauga, which is the city that I'm from. And so I thought it'd be funny to kind of write a love letter / diss letter a little bit for the city of Mississauga. Maybe if you've grown up here in Humboldt County thinking, oh, there's nothing to do with all the beautiful redwoods and trails, then maybe this is a poem you can relate to a little bit. And you are allowed to laugh, by the way. Poetry doesn't have to be that serious. You don't have to, but you're allowed to. Dear Mississauga, you contain exactly 4 things: elementary schools, middle-aged couples, babies, and teenagers complaining about all of the above. There is nothing to do around here. I searched karaoke near me, Mississauga, and it points me all the way to downtown Toronto. I search gay bar near me, and Google returns me my own address. Well played. Also, even if there were things to do, there is no way to get there. It takes me an hour and a half and 3 buses to travel to a cafe a 15-minute drive away. No one likes living here. Like most, I've spent my entire life hating on this suburban dream until I moved away to the nightlife of a university town and found myself missing the stillness of my second-floor bedroom. The maple tree outside my window. Human beings love to long for something. Gift a person one of multiple worlds, and they will never stop talking about how they grew up on the shortest end of all the sticks. So I'm sure that, were I raised someplace else, like the blazing metropolis of some major city, or out on the wheat field prairie, where the land stretches in as many directions as the sky, then I would surely grow up longing for this childhood fantasy, this suburban sprawl, hot summer sidewalk, evening sprinkler, picket fence, an endless succession of soccer fields, sweat-drenched jersey, the plastic jungle gym, playground sand emptied out of the shoe, and maybe when we say, I wish I lived someplace else, what we are really saying is, I wish I could be someone else, as if your lack of gay bar is the only thing holding me back from the greenest grass in the entire neighborhood, the longest stick in the universe. Look to your map to pin the blame of our unhappiness, when all you did was give us an imperfect place to call home. So, Saga. Can I call you Saga? This is my apology. This is my penance. This is my love letter, Saga. You cricket cries across summer grass. You driving past Pearson at sunset. You fireworks after the main show. There is beauty in what is not here. And now, when I return home from my trips into the city and all its blinking lights, and I lie in the same bed I did as a child, and is just as quiet. And the maple outside my window is perhaps taller now, but rustles just the same. In that moment, I do not long for anywhere but right where I am. Love, a girl who grew up in your fields. P.S. Please get rid of the 14 speed bumps along Barrington Boulevard. Thank you. All right, so now you all know about this small little suburb called Mississauga, located near Toronto. So there's that, so you learned that today. Going on a little bit, why do I enjoy writing and performing spoken word poetry? I think there's so many beautiful parts about this art form, and like you've seen maybe some of the poems I did, like Athlete A, I think it allows you a platform to speak about things that you feel like are important to you, whether that's like racism or like mental health. I think it's also a great tool for uncovering shame, because it's literally speaking about things that sometimes we aren't supposed to speak about. And I think it's also a great tool for self-reflection and connective healing. And so this next poem that I'm going to do, I was a little bit uncertain about it, but I think I am going to do this poem. It's called 16 Seconds, and so this is kind of an interesting school because you have one class per grade. And so my question is, for your health classes or your gym classes, are they segregated by gender? No? Okay, yeah, I figured you all don't have enough teachers to go around. You're like, there's already 17 kids to begin with. So for me it was, because I went to a bigger school, and so it was segregated to the girls and the boys. And I remember when I was 14 years old, so when I was in grade 9, all the girls in one of our phys ed classes, we had this man come in like full like body armor, like padding around all the important parts that you want padding. And what happened was that he took turns attacking us. We took turns getting attacked by him, and we had to fight him off, and it was our personal defense training, essentially. And so I remember that this memory was really bored into me, and so I kind of wrote this poem about that. When I was 14, they held a personal defense training for all the girls in my high school. It took 16 seconds for the male demonstrator to get me onto my chest on the floor. I felt for the first time what it is like to be held down. I felt how powerless I can become. If there is a world in which I am not a woman, I do not know what I would be. I have heard too many stories of ex-girlfriends left dead by morning. Last year, students in my neighborhood woke in the night to find strange men crouched over their bodies. I dream of my ex-boyfriend pushing open my bedroom window in my sleep. I check twice if the doors are locked. I circle his map on a name I circle his name on a map of places to look should I disappear. I practice swinging a metal baseball bat as if it could serve any purpose at all because it took 16 seconds for the male demonstrator to get me onto my chest on the floor. His body an armored shield, his knee a pin against my back. If there is a world in which I am not a woman, I do not know what I would be. I have read too many stories of past lovers killed in a car's back seat. Last Saturday, a man at a bus stop whistled at me, words curled into the form of a fist. I wonder what the boys did on Personal Defense Day. Last winter, a man courted me at the top of a hill, his laughter condensing into all the ways he might kill me. I wonder what the boys did on Personal Defense Day. I want to be the kind of woman who cackles men back. I want to be a girl who can flip a boy onto his chest in 16 seconds. I write a list of the things I will say the next time a stranger calls out at me on the street. I fear that, come time, I will open my mouth and an apology will fall out onto the sidewalk. Thank you so much. So that poem is called 16 Seconds. And yeah, it's just a bit of a reflection. I feel like it's very relevant because this is a high school, and I think just growing up reflecting on, like, why do we have a gender health class? I'm glad that we don't do that here. So yeah, thanks for listening to that poem. So one other question that I think I sometimes get when I'm teaching is how do I decide what to write about, or like how do I know what to write about? And one thing that I often like to say is to write about your truth. Specifically, write about your truth. Write about the things that you know, write about the things that you are able to write about because you've had direct life experiences with that. And so you might have noticed that for me, a lot of my work centers around girlhood, around feminism, womanhood, because these are the experiences that have shaped me personally the most. But like you've seen with some of my other poems, like I also write weird poems about my city, and I write about family and lineage, and really a whole variety of topics. And so I'm going to do 2 more poems for you, and this penultimate poem called Fairy Lake is actually about a classmate of mine. So show of hands here if you have ever had someone, I also know it's a bit of a personal question, you don't have to answer, but has anyone here ever had a friend or classmate close to their age actually pass away? Okay, yeah. It's a strange feeling, right? It's really weird because I think we are used to our grandparents dying, although it's still heartbreaking, but we're used to older folk dying. But it's just so strange to have someone your age. So what happened was when I was 12, 13, I went to this pretty small middle school, not unlike the one here where everyone was pretty close, everyone sort of knew each other. And there was this one girl in my grade 7 class called Nikki, who would always talk about going to like these summer cottages, and we'd be like, oh my god, we don't know what that's like, because like we're immigrant children, we don't go to cottages. And what actually happened was that a couple years ago, she was hiking on her own in British Columbia, up in Canada, and she actually passed away as a result of an accident that happened there. So it was very strange just reflecting back on this girl that we both knew each other at such a formative stage in our lives, and though I wouldn't say that we were close friends, we were definitely close classmates in that sense. So one day I went to a cottage reunion with a bunch of middle school classmates of mine from that grade 7 year, and while I was there I wrote this poem as reflection. When we were children, Nikki told our class endless stories of family cottages. Now she is gone, and we are 10 years older, spending the summer on the shores of a northern lake. City trees don't grow this way, spindle trunks reaching up towards a domed sky. Forest floors of pine needles and moss-bearded rocks. Back then, I knew a boy with spindle limbs stretching out into the universe. We laughed at every vacation story, some unreachable Canadian dream we could not fathom. The boy is older now, grows his hair out into curls, trims a beard of moss. We row in tandem, slicing open the water, giving sight to all she will never see again. The water, an unchanging funeral. The first morning, I launched myself off the dock, a single pebble dropping into the lake's impenetrable night. The water, an endless universe of seaweed stars. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but her terror staring back at me. The sky goldens, and the boy and I steer back to the shoreline, to the trees older than the three of us combined. The Canadian North, a childhood story unraveling in our palms at last. Like the pines, we will age while she does not. Like the water, I will hold onto her memory, drifting out across the glacial lake. Mist, mist, and then smoke. Thank you. All right, so this last poem that I'm going to do, one thing I will say, and we can talk about more about this in the Q&A as well, but in terms of talking about, who here would identify as an introvert? Okay, yeah, that's about expected. Didn't Marceau, did you just raise your hand? Yeah, no, that seems about right. Yeah, so I was incredibly introverted as a kid. I was so shy. I made no friends in ballet class when I was 5. If you told me in a few years ago that I would be on a stage performing spoken word to kind strangers, I would have told you had the wrong girl. And the first time I performed, my heart leapt out of my chest. I thought I was going to have a heart attack for 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. And this is all just to say that if you have a desire to perform your work, you absolutely can perform your work. And it gets easier and easier every single time you do it. So, this last poem that I'm going to do is called Walking the Hamilton-Brantford Rail Trail. This was when I was at university and I was living in a somewhat smaller city, a couple hours away from Toronto. And there was this beautiful little walking trail that used to run sort of behind my apartment, and I would often walk there in the evenings and sort of go over the part where it passed the highway. I'd stand there and I'd look at the blinking cars going one way and the other. It was very beautiful. And one night I was walking there and I noticed that there was all of a sudden all these plastic flowers that someone had put over the bridge, sort of like what happens when someone passes away or when you do a memorial. Only instead of teddy bears, there were all these little sticky notes posted around the flowers with little words of encouragement about mental health. And so sort of standing there watching the cars and thinking about who did this and why, and I wrote this poem. Oh, and also content warning for suicide here, although it is a gentle poem and has a gentle landing. There are suicide flowers along the Hamilton-Brantford rail trail tonight. A lattice of pastel pinks and yellows encircling the sidebars of the bridge overlooking the highway. How strange, lifeless flowers tasked with protecting the living. My first thought is, who would try jumping from this height in the first place? I know enough about falling to know that this distance won't quite cut it, but then, of course, I know enough about falling to understand that sometimes you try anyway, and so my second thought is why. There are pastel blue post-it notes scattered around the flowers. Their paper shells glossed with plastic tape to stave off the rain that has seeped through the cracks and dissolved their writings anyway. Half-washed out helpline numbers, Sharpie hearts smeared from the wet sorrow of a lonesome sky. I can barely read most of them. And my third thought is of how many people have stood on this ledge, watching two rivers of white and red stream towards and away, and felt a longing so complete it swallows the heart, or if it is only me, perched on this windswept steel ribbon of night, hands gripping the flowering metal in fear of losing my balance, while the part of me that is tired whispers, what if you did? And there is one blue sticky note that has not yet fallen prey to the rain. And letters as deep as the night. Not a bad life, just a bad day. What a small, feeble attempt. Petals fighting asphalt, plastic fighting rain. A single railing decorated in a highway of metal and night, and my last thought is if it would make a difference to the lonesome heart, unfurling itself along the bridge at twilight, And to that I reply, yes. Yes, it would. Yes. Thank you. All right, so that concludes the performance aspect of this event today. So we will now move on to the question and answer period. And so if you have any questions, or if you just like want to talk, like that's also fine. Just like raise your hand, and you can probably just shout it at me. It's a pretty small room. If there's no questions, Marceau will fill the otherwise awkward silence with questions that I have previously given him. But yeah, questions? You just want to like tell me something random about your day? Like why 2/3 of your school is missing? Sorry, what?
There's a play. You have to practice for it.
Oh, there's a play, yes. But guys, I'm more important than the play. No, it's okay. I understand. The play is important.
No, like the play is today.
No, I understand. Yes, Marceau told me, yes. Also, the fact that I just adjusted my own mic stand makes me feel so cool, because I always want to be the kind of person who like does that, you know? Oh, yes, question, go ahead.
Do you like choreograph your arm movements and the way you say things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. No. I want to. Like, I want to be more deliberate about starts using hand gestures, about the hand gestures that I use. But I find that usually I just start performing and whatever happens, and I tend to fall into just doing the same ones over and over again. But I would like to be more deliberate about it. Yeah, it's a great question, actually. Thank you. See, that wasn't on my... Oh, here, you get bonus points if you can ask me a question that I didn't put on the list of 10 questions that I gave to Marceau. So, yeah, bonus point right there. Yes, was it a hand in the back?
Yes. When you're performing like emotional poetry pieces, like how do you do it without becoming like outwardly emotional?
Yeah, like how do you do it without becoming really emotional? Yeah, so the first thing I will say is that it's okay to be really emotional when you're performing your pieces. The spoken word community is so kind. People are so accepting, like they want you to come in, they want you to share your work and your emotions, so it's absolutely okay if you get emotional. But I also will say that for me, I find that the closer in time I'm performing a poem to when I have written it, or when the event that inspired the poem happened, the more emotional I will be, and I think you can hear that in the voice. And I think if you go on Button Poetry, you watch other famous poets, like poets who write breakup poems, you'll see them perform a piece like years ago, and you'll hear the heartbreak, you'll hear the emotion, you'll hear them perform it a few years later, and it'll be a little bit different. And so that emotion does definitely change with time as well, but it is absolutely welcome, and it is. I think it makes the piece even better, in my opinion. Yeah, we'll go 1, 2. Yes.
How do you not get wrapped up in like a personal perfectionism about your pieces? Like, how do you let it just come out of you without like worrying about how it happens?
Yeah, like is the question like how do you perform without worrying about perfecting the performance?
It's or more about like the writing of the pieces.
The writing, the perfectionist.
About the end result.
Yeah.
Write authentically.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. So the question is, how are you able to write and perform without worrying about perfecting your pieces and letting that interfere with your work? Who here has experienced writer's block? Okay, I love that like so many of you are like artists as well. Yeah, so I definitely have. Where do you think writer's block, I know this isn't directly your question, I'll get there, but where do you think writer's block comes from? Yeah?
For me, it's being too perfectionistic about what I'm trying to put on the page.
Exactly, you are more intelligent than I was at your age. Writer's block usually comes from being like, it has to be perfect, and because it's not perfect, I can't write anything. And so honestly, for me, I struggle a lot with that idea of things needing to be perfect. I am myself kind of a perfectionist, just like how I was raised. But I also think that's like part of the beauty of spoken word, is that it kind of forces you to let go of that perfection, because performing here in the church today, I know that conditions aren't going to be perfect. When I showed up, I started getting ready mentally for preparing, like performing without a microphone, you know, and that's fine. You just gotta like roll with the punches. So yeah, it's definitely hard, and I just kind of try to remind myself that things don't have to be perfect, and that it's okay to perform something even if it's not. yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to offer you there. It's something that I struggle with as well. Yeah, for sure. And over there.
Are you having a good day?
I'm having a great day. Thank you. Are you having a good day? Okay, I don't know what I would have said. You said no. I've been like, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Marcel. Oh, no. I'm gonna. The students always get priority over you, Marcel. Yes.
How's the microphone treating you?
One more time.
How is the microphone treating you?
It's good. It's good. Yeah, I prefer this to having to project my voice. Yeah, I'm a quiet poet. Like, I think you'll see that there are lots of different styles of spoken word poetry, and I've been experimenting with like some like louder pieces, like the Mississauga poem. But I think like at my core, I'm kind of like a more quiet poet. So microphones are nice. I think I saw 2 hands, so we'll go 1, 2.
How much editing is too much editing to your piece?
So the question is, how much editing is too much editing to your piece? That's a really good question. It's definitely, in my opinion, it is, if you want to produce art to be performed, it's often very helpful to edit your poems. I guess like, I'll answer the question of like, how do you know when you're done editing, is what I'll say. And for me, I know that I'm done editing. A few markers were, 1, the meaning of the poem is clear to other people. 2, I feel genuine joy and happiness with every single line in the poem, in the sense that I know that that line is there and that it's supposed to be there and that it's serving the meaning of the poem. And 3, to be honest, like sometimes even if the first 2 conditions aren't met, I kind of just stop if I really just don't feel like working on the poem anymore. Sometimes I get like, I go to a residency and I like forget about all my other work that I had in progress before the residency, which is okay, you know. So, but yeah, it's a good question, and again, it's something that I'm working on a lot myself as well, as getting better at editing my pieces. Other hand here.
So, you said that you did ballet when you were like.
Okay, if I did ballet, go ahead.
How long did you do it?
Okay, by did ballet, I mean that I know I did ballet for 2 years because I have 2 tutus in my closet. One is smaller and green. One is slightly, when I say smaller, I mean like one is this big, and then one is like this big and pink. So I know I did it when I was 4 and 5, and by did it, I mean I was the worst kid in the class of like 6 people. I was always like looking at the girls being, and I couldn't point my foot. Like I think I actually have a medical condition where I can't point my foot, which is not ideal for ballet. But yeah, do you do ballet?
Yeah.
Okay. Pardon?
6 to 7 goes now.
Okay, you are, I believe that. And you, after a month, you were probably better than me when I was 4. So, they say start them young, but starting them young doesn't always help, so, yeah. Other questions? Okay, yeah, well, we'll take a couple from Marceau, and then if there's nothing else, we'll wrap to the Q&A segment. Marceau, go ahead.
How do you design the sequence in which you do your various poems?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I usually try to start out with a piece that I think is good. I love all my pieces, but I try to start out with a piece that's very attention grabbing. That's one of my best pieces of work because I want to put my best foot forward to start out. I also want my first piece to be a piece that I'm fairly familiar with. Atelier, I have performed many times in many different circumstances, large venues, so I'm very comfortable with it. So I know it'll be like a good starting point for me. From that point onwards, there's many different ways that poets build their sets. Some poets might do a slow build where it starts low in energy and then it gets higher and higher. Some poets do like a roller coaster type thing where you go high energy, low energy, high energy, low energy, and that's kind of what I try to do today. In terms of what poems you put in your set, again, it also varies. Today, because I'm coming here to showcase spoken word, I want to show the diversity of spoken word. I chose pieces that are about a variety of topics, like you saw feminism, wacky poems about culture, etc. But sometimes you might go to an event and you might just do poems about feminism because the event requires that. And yeah, that's basically it. And I do think that like curating what poems to do in a set is an art form in and of itself, and also something I need to work on, which is what we'll see at the end of all these questions. But yeah, good question, Marceau. Also, I didn't give him that, so he gets a gold star as well. We're all Q&A? Good? All right, great. So, oh, there's one more. Where? Oh, hi, you. What's my favorite? I don't think I really have one. Like, Probably blue or like, yeah, I'm basic, I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know if these questions are about spoken word, but we're like running out of time, so I'll go 1, 2.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs, 100%.
Thank you.
Who here is a dog person? What? We're out? Oh, okay. Half. Yeah, I'd expect. Yeah. In the back?
I know you define spoken word as poetry that's designed for being performed out loud. I was wondering if there's any characteristics you think of that maybe distinguish spoken word from written poetry.
Ooh, definitely, yeah. So like, how can you tell when someone's performing that they are a spoken word poet? I think when you write a poem for the purpose of being performed to an audience, there is usually more focus on the flow of the poem in terms of like how you say it. So even as I'm writing, I'll like write a little bit and then I have to like read it out loud and see how that flows, and then I'll adjust like little words here and there. Whereas I feel like when you're writing primarily page poetry, which is poetry that of course can be read out loud, but is meant to be read on the page, I think that usually like it doesn't matter as much how it sounds, and it's more about how it flows when you're reading it using that little voice in your head. So I do think like that is one of the differences. Yeah, but definitely lots of crossover. Yes. Pardon? What's my favorite weather? Your weather right here. No. Well, I mean, I like blue. I don't know. Blue skies are nice. I think it's lovely here. I love how the whole city or area is often shrouded in mist. It feels like the whole place is kind of a secret waiting to be discovered. So it's a very poetic way of putting it. But I feel like if I let the silence go on long enough, so yes. All right. I wonder if this is a spoken word question. Go ahead.
Do you ever like perform someone else's poetry? Or like is that
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is the best question. Also, none of these questions have been on my list so far, so ding ding ding. But okay, so the question is, do I ever perform someone else's work? Yes. I think that performing the work of other poets is such a good way to start out, because one, I think it's like less vulnerable to perform someone else's work, because you're like, this isn't my soul that I'm sharing, this is someone else's soul that I'm sharing. So there's less vulnerability there, but I think it also challenges you to test out different performance techniques when maybe your own writing isn't at the caliber yet that will allow you to practice that with your own work. And yes, there are a few, like who here watches button poetry on YouTube? The English teacher. Big surprise. Okay, yeah, like a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, there's like a lot of famous poets on Button, and yeah, like they have a few pieces that I've performed before. And yeah, it's really fun. And I do want to host an event sometime where everyone just comes and does a cover poem from a famous poet, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. I considered doing one today, but then I was like, nah, I'm here for me. Yeah.
Do you have some favorite spoken word poets that you recommend?
Absolutely. Okay, so this one, no gold star, because this is on my list, or double gold star, if that's how you want to think about it. So yeah, so the question of what are some of your favorite poets? So Phil K, Sarah K, nod your head if you okay, the English teacher nods their head. Michael Lee, Olivia Gatwood. Oh, Olivia Gatwood, guys. Olivia Gatwood. Ocean Vuong, Ebony Stewart, Brenna, I should learn how to say her name. Brenna Twowy. Neil Hilborn is a really, I think he's really great for high schoolers, like Neil Hilborn. He just like writes really funny poems that are really wacky. Yeah, Rhiannon McGavin, Franny Trott, and Andrea Gibson are some of my favorites that I prepared to tell you about today. Yes. What's your favorite food? Yeah. Oh, it doesn't feel so good, does it? Yeah, that must suck, right? Being put on the spot to talk about your favorite food. Careful, not now, because the silence is going on so long, your answer has to be even better. Muffins? Okay, that's... Sorry? Okay, I've eaten 4 muffins since coming here, so I approve. I also enjoy muffins. Yes. What's your name, by the way? Nico? Okay, Nico the Muffin Man.
So you know the Muffin Man, right?
Do I know the Muffin Man? Do you know the Muffin Man? The Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Thank you! Alright, thank you for finishing that. Okay, we have a few more minutes if there's any more questions. If not, I think I'll also just talk a little bit from my list. A few things. Okay, so one, oh, yes, was there?
I don't know the answer to this question already, but like, do you know, like, when, obviously you know, like, when did you start studying poetry?
When did I start spoken word? Yeah, that's a good question. Also, like the smallest little hand, her hand raise was like this. So I was like, did you say this? Yeah, so I started spoken word. It depends how you count it, but I would say it was November 2019 or May 2020 was when I started getting serious in it. So it hasn't been that long. Like it feels to me like it's been years and years, but depending on how you count it, it's been like 2.5 or 3 years. But I think that's one of the beautiful things of working in spoken word is that your advancement in the field is not dependent on time. It's dependent on how much energy you put into it. So especially I feel like since graduating university this past April, May, and being a full-time artist, I feel like I've grown so much in a short space of time. Yeah, and I love that about spoken word, about how you can like kind of like make whatever you want to make of it. She's contemplating her own career in spoken word. You're like,
Off of what you said when you started, you pretty much said you started around when COVID started. How was that?
It was very interesting. I call myself a pandemic poet or a COVID poet, and it means that I did dozens and dozens of Zoom performances and like even like several features, like where you're like a feature performer, like I am here now on Zoom, before I ever like really performed poetry on a stage. I started like poetry like slightly before COVID hit, so like I performed once or twice in person and then it was like lockdown. But for me it was really good because I also have a disability actually. I struggle with walking and standing, and so actually having Zoom was really good I think for starting out because it allowed me to go to like an event every week or like even 2 events a week online. And it's like also less nerve-wracking performing on Zoom because you don't have to worry about what your legs are doing. You only have to worry about like the top half of your body, and you're in a familiar environment. You're in your home. You get to have your poem right on the screen, like split screen with the Zoom, so you look like you have it memorized even though you don't. So I think it was good for me honestly having Zoom. But I think it's also been really important like breaking out of Zoom and doing more in-person performances like this. Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Do you find that a lot of your content, like, is there one area that you, I know you mentioned like feminism.
Yeah.
Like, are there other content areas that you feel really drawn to?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, so for me, I call myself a spoken word artist, and I say that my work centers around feminism, girlhood, gender-based violence, that sort of thing. So that is definitely the one main area of focus. And it's been really interesting, but just in the past month, I've kind of been figuring out, so what are like my secondary interests? And I would say that they are culture / like Chinese, Canadianism, mental health, and disability. And the last category, I would just say all like the weird, wacky poems that I think are also important to give energy to. Yeah, good question. Okay, we'll do one more.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I'm not going to tell you about her. Unless you really, her name, she's 4 years younger. She studies computer science in Toronto. Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I do.
Are they here right now? Oh, are they? That's funny. Cool. Yeah, so the last thing that I'll say at the end of this Q&A is for anyone who's like maybe curious about performing their poetry, but is like a little bit nervous. One thing that I always say is that whether you're doing a poetry performance or a debate or a school presentation, you will always look less nervous than you actually are. And that's because when you are speaking in front of people, you are inside of your body. So you are feeling your breath shake. You are feeling your hands trembling. You're feeling your heart going. But everyone else is just watching you. And so they can't feel what you're feeling. They're far away from you. Like, you guys are pretty far right now. And also, they don't know you that well. So they don't know what you look like when you're nervous. And so I find that that's like usually a helpful thing to keep in mind when you're like going up for the first few times. And as we were, so what's gonna happen now as we're like closing in on time is, so the next portion of this event is going to be about an hour till the end of the school day. It's going to be a workshop. So I will run you through brainstorming, editing, and polishing your own spoken word or poetry piece. And so, I guess show of hands, who would like to stay for that?
Well, humanities, you stay. And
Okay, so the people who were forced to stay, you stay.
and then everybody else is welcome to stay as well.
Okay, so it seems like about half of the people will be staying, half of them by volition, half of them by force. And so I will say, so for the people who are going to be leaving now, next Friday, so like a week from now, is going to be the NPA Poetry Slam. I'm going to be coming back. I will wear something jazzy, hopefully, bring the energy up, and we're going to actually have a poetry competition. Now, one thing that I probably should have explained that earlier, but I can do it now, is that I am a spoken word poet, is what I say I am. So spoken word, like I said, poetry. Category, spoken word is poetry that is meant to be performed. Page poetry is poetry that is meant to be read. We can forget about that because I'm not a page poet. So, spoken word poetry is poetry that is meant to be performed. Now, slam poetry, not stand-up poetry. Sometimes people call it stand-up poetry because they're like stand-up comedy, stand-up poetry. It's not stand-up poetry. It's slam poetry. It's poetry that is performed in poetry competition. And so, it can be anything. It can just be like spoken word, just as broad, but usually slam you might find has a certain tone to it. It's usually a bit more angry. It's usually very social justice centered. And yeah, like you'll see if you ever like attend a poetry slam. And so we are going to be hosting a poetry slam, which just means that we are hosting a poetry competition. So what's going to happen is that each of you whoever signs up, each poet is going to have up to 3 minutes to perform an original spoken word piece, something that you have written yourself. We are going to have a panel of student judges. That is right, you will be judged by your peers, literally judged by your peers. And they're going to score your poem on a scale of 1 to 10. We will average the scores, and the top winner and probably a couple runner-ups will get some gift cards courtesy of NPA. They will probably be for various areas around here. Pardon? Scoop? Okay, cool. I don't know. Sounds like an ice cream place. Sounds good. So that is going to be the poetry slam. And if you want to sign up, Marceau, is it just a paper sign up? Is it just a paper sign up for the slam? Like
there's a paper sign up outside. You can come to me as well.
Okay.
Paper sign up at the front door and at the announcement board.
Okay, perfect. So what he said. Yeah. Okay. Just trying to make sure there's nothing else. If you want to follow my work, it's Lisa Shen on Instagram. ITSLISASHEN. I'm off there right now because I'm doing a social media cleanse while I'm on the residency, but I'll be back later. So I think that's basically it. So if you are interested in signing up for the poetry slam, which you definitely should, even if it's a really short poem, like up to 3 minutes, but it can be like 30 seconds, it can be a minute, whatever. So just make sure that you have written your piece by a week from now, Friday, and that you've maybe like practiced it a couple times if you want to make you feel more comfortable. And yeah, thanks all for being a great audience for the performance. And anything else I need to say, Marceau?
No, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So those of you who are staying here, come back in 5 minutes, and the rest go to your class. But thank you so much, Lisa. What a joy. Yay.
Yeah, great. See you in a week.